and even, Jon Stewart, there's posts going on Instagram with him talking about, people asking him about whether he's going to run for president or not. And, his punchline to that is basically the words right before you should run for president are "fuck it, you should run for president." And it basically shows people's dissatisfaction with the current choices. But, what I haven't seen anybody talking about when we think about somebody like Jon Stewart is that you have a major world leader who used to be an actor and a comedian running the country of Ukraine.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Trailblaze. I'm here with my new co-host. So excited that Matt Butler is now going to be joining us, and we will keep talking about the 2028 presidential campaign. No place else can you go where people will talk more about the 2028 presidential campaign than Trailblaze. That is what this show is all about. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jamal?
I'm good. Lots of news happening. Obviously, this week is the anniversary of Donald Trump as the president of the United States. I don't know if we're supposed to
3
clap
years to
for
go.
that. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's right. The countdown. The countdown is on. God help us if we can make it for 3 more years.
Yeah, and I would be remiss to miss the January 19th, 22nd anniversary of John Kerry's win in the Iowa caucus.
Well, there you go.
The 22nd anniversary of the Dean Scream. So, kind of an exciting time many years ago in my political life.
Yeah, this is, January is always kind of the fun time in presidential politics because it's when the primaries get started. And so we are officially, I guess, 2 years out from the first Democratic presidential primary in the nominating process. 2 years out. All right. This is fun.
And what's interesting is we don't know what that contest is going to be yet. So where it's going to happen.
We don't have a single clue. We just saw last week that the DNC met for the Rules and Bylaws Committee. For those of you who are big DNC heads, this is a big deal because the Rules and Bylaws Committee helps decide which states go in which order for the presidential nominating process that will start 2 years from now. And they had a big meeting last week.
They didn't.
Yeah, they did. So here's what I know. There were some states that said they wanted to go in the nominating window. They wanted to go first. So applications got made. We know it's historically, it was always New Hampshire, Iowa, then New Hampshire, and then a bunch of states. Lately, it got to be Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina got put in. When Joe Biden was there, he bumped South Carolina up to the front. But now these states have put in to be first, being the first windows. New Hampshire, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, New Mexico, and Delaware. And we've got word that Nevada and South Carolina will also try to get back in that window as well. So what do you think about any of those states, Matt?
Well, I think everything's being turned on its head, right? I mean, it was Iowa and New Hampshire first and second for I don't even know how long it was. As long as I've been in politics and been paying attention. So it's at least 1984. It's been those 2 states first. Now that we don't, there were some issues with the Iowa caucus in 2020. So they did not count the Iowa caucus back in 2024 in that nominating contest that Joe Biden was largely running unopposed. But we have not seen exactly what the rules are going to be for the contest going forward. In 2024, Joe Biden was in the White House, and so he basically gets to tell the DNC what he wants the nominating process to look like. He's the leader of the party, and so he was having a lot of influence on that. We don't have that situation now. So now it's actually up to the Democratic National Committee and the chairman, Ken Martin, to figure out exactly what this contest is going to look like.
Yeah. And, I think the thinking of the Biden team was they just wanted to shut down any possibility of a strong primary challenge. We did have that one primary challenge that was out there, but it didn't take off. Because what we have seen is when you have a sitting president with a strong primary challenge, that sitting president tends to lose. That happened to Jimmy Carter when Ted Kennedy ran against him, and it happened to George Bush the first, and are now in the royalty of the Bush family. Happened to him when Pat Buchanan ran against him. We haven't seen that happen to a Democrat really, and so it's a big deal that Biden was trying to keep that from happening to him this time by
Right.
putting South Carolina up front because he knew he was going to dominate in South Carolina.
That's right. That's right. Right. He's, in 2020, he did not win in Iowa and he did not win in New Hampshire. And people were thinking that he was kind of done. And then, through some really great campaigning and also some kind of political machinations
Mhm.
to get a couple of the other candidates to endorse him at the exact right time, he sort of had this, meteoric rise through the primary and and came in sort of out of nowhere.
Right.
I think 2020 was a little bit particular though, because we had, there was the kind of the one thing was we have this existential threat to democracy in the White House in Donald Trump. You're in the beginnings of COVID, and people are dying. Like thousands of people by this point are dying, and we had to get rid of Donald Trump. And Joe Biden seemed like the most logical person to be able to do that.
You know,
So I think that's why you also saw that kind of that wave to Biden.
to go back in that Wayback Machine, remember when Biden was running, it was almost like, it was always Biden, right? Biden was ahead in every single poll. People were always challenging him to see who was going to take it away from Biden, particularly with African-American voters. He was strong. He was strong with older white voters. He was strong. But then there was that Bernie boomlet. Like Bernie popped back up
Yep.
and he won those early contests. And I think the establishment Democratic Party, I mean, you remember this. People dropped out like
Mhm.
flies, and everybody
Yeah.
endorsed Joe Biden. He became kind of the anti-Bernie and was able to win that primary.
Yeah, it really did look like Bernie was going to be able to take it. I mean, he had money, he had a lot of support, and it really took the entire Democratic institution and kind of institutional Democrats to turn against him. But like I said, there was a big threat. We really needed to get away from Donald Trump. I think most kind of mainline Democrats said. They may even like what Bernie Sanders was saying, but they said, we don't want to take a chance with this.
Well,
We,
remember
we
what
got
Bernie
to get rid of Trump.
remember what Bernie did? I thought, because I was one of these people who was kind of like, I don't know, Bernie's skeptical. But then
Yeah.
Bernie started to win, and he was making a lot of sense in his analysis, and so okay, maybe Bernie might be the guy. And then Bernie Sanders got up and gave that speech after winning the primary, and he basically declared war on the establishment of the Democratic Party. He said, not only are we going to beat Trump, we're also going to beat the establishment of the Democratic Party. And I think for his faithful, they were all there. But for people who were
Yeah.
kind of in the establishment, that meant mayors, governors, sitting members of Congress, a lot of people who were DNC members who were sitting there thinking, wait a minute, aren't we all going to do this together, or are you declaring war on me too? I think if Bernie had had a very different stance at that moment and he had come out and said, listen, we have a lot of issues to settle inside the Democratic Party, but the biggest issue we have to settle is getting rid of Donald Trump. I need everybody on this team. I'm welcoming everybody to my movement. Let's go win. I think that might have helped Bernie in that primary process, but he didn't do it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, we see this traditionally in every primary for each of the parties. Is you run, relatively far to the left in the Democratic Party or farther to the left, and then when it looks like you're going to be the nominee and you're going to be in the general election, you've got to come back to the center and you got to big tent it. And Bernie didn't look like he was doing that, and
Yeah.
that actually, if you really did think you were about to win the primary, that is the time to do it. Now, I will give all the credit to Bernie Sanders and his staff. They had a core set of beliefs, and I believe that if you had somebody on, they would talk about, look, Democrats are part of the problem for people as well, and establishment Democrats, and that he was just staying true to his message. So, but he didn't win the primary, so
And if you
you
think
can be,
about
you can be pure, but
if you think about that message, I think that Bernie message is really clear to me. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, maybe AOC, they have got a phenomenal way of analyzing the problems that the country faces. They're thinking about what's happening with the wealth distribution in the country and how that's screwing people. There are 54 million Americans between the ages of 18 and 29 right now. They're sitting on $320 billion worth of school debt, right? It's so hard to then make $30,000, $40,000 a year and then spend a third of your income basically paying school debt before you have to have these exorbitant rent prices because we see the housing shortage. And then
right.
we haven't even talked about AI, right? So then AI is coming, it's going to displace people. So how are we going to keep people employed when workers are going to be displaced? They've got a great analysis. I'm not sure about their solutions, but when it comes to the analysis, I think everybody in the party has something to learn from listening to them.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think we're in an interesting point here, and I think this is really what this Democratic primary is all about. Is you have kind of longtime establishment Democrats thinking that what we need to be doing is running moderate candidates, going for the kind of the swing voters, pulling over sort of moderate Republicans to our side, running very sort of conservative Democrats that we have in the past, sort of like Bill Clinton, like Barack Obama, not super far left Democrats. And the people who support that plan really think that the people on the far left are out of their minds. Like that is not the way to go.
I'm
Conversely,
laughing.
you've got the people on the left who believe like, look, the fact is that we've been running this establishment, moderate, sort of middle of the road playbook for 30 years. It worked great in the 90s and the early 2000s, but that's not where we are today. The wealth gap has been increasing exponentially. You've got more billionaires than you've had before. And we really need to be addressing these problems of inequality in this country. And so that we need to be running somebody who is like super progressive, almost to the edge of socialism. And, those people think that these moderates are the problem. And then that's the reason that we've been losing elections. And, this is going to be a giant fight between these two sides who are sort of diametrically opposed. And, we're going to have to figure that out in this primary. This is the way that people are going to say, no, we think this is the direction that we should go. And it'll be very interesting to see who's right in this. And I'll be completely honest, I actually don't know which side is right. I'm traditionally, from my background, been sort of with the moderates, but I don't know that they've got the right playbook this time.
And I
So
think if you're going to be a moderate candidate, this is my advice to the moderates is you got to have some pretty bold ideas and you got to say them with your chest, right? Like, don't go
yeah,
out there, like, don't be moderate in tone and don't be moderate in approach. You can say, like, like one example is if you're looking at the fact that 75% of investment income in the country gets spent in 4 states, California, New York, Massachusetts, I think in Texas. If that's happening and 90% of that, 95% of that money is being spent with white male company, founders, then I would say like, well, let's have a radical investment opportunity for people of color, for women, for, Latinos, African Americans. Let's get more capitalism, more money into those economies. Let people build their own companies and have their entrepreneurial dreams come true using that money. That, I don't know, is that left or right? I don't know how you kind of define a program that says, let's get more investment capital into the hands of the people who want to create new and innovative products. I don't know where that sits on the ideological spectrum.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where on the spectrum, and I think there's a number of issues that are sort of starting to cross these lines, right? I mean, you will have a lot of the people in the kind of Bernie Sanders camp also agreeing with a lot of the stuff that Steve Bannon is saying, and a lot of the stuff that Trump is saying, and kind of from a populist bent of like actually having the economy working for working people, like it really does. Now, I don't think Trump's got the solutions for doing this, to be very clear about that, but
Yeah,
we
like
do
for
have to figure out yeah, go.
yeah, no. For instance, like think about student loan debt. So on one hand, you just say like, let's wipe out all the student loan debt and everybody can start over from zero. That is an approach. You could also say, let's wipe out all the interest on student loan debt. Because for those of us who paid student loans, you spend like half your time paying loans, really just paying the interest. So if you
Just paying
got
the
rid of
interest.
student loan interest, you would absolve like all this huge debt load from most of the people in the country. And maybe it's not everything, but it certainly ain't nothing, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I graduated from law school in 2000. I think it was about 2018, 2019 that I finally finished paying off
Yep.
that debt. So I've really only been, I mean, I haven't even been debt free for 10 years, and I've been out of law school for, for 26.
Right.
So it's really it's a terrible situation. It was much cheaper to go to school in 1997 to 2000 than it is today too. So
I know.
I
All
think
right.
you're exactly right.
So one of the places where this might get sorted out is if a state like Michigan gets boosted up into the primary calendar to be a little higher up. Some people might say, advertising in a market like Detroit is super expensive, so that's one of the reasons people go against it. But also, so many people are now getting their information from social media. The advertising there isn't as expensive, but you've got labor unions, you've got Jewish voters, you've got voters from the Middle East who are there. You've
Yep.
got rural voters in outstate Michigan. It's a state that even though it's large, it does have all the components of an Iowa, and it's a battleground state because a lot of people believe,
Right.
why should we be fighting out these primaries in states that we aren't going to win in the general election?
That's exactly right as well. And what I will say is, if you're going to say, oh, the media markets are too expensive, the main media market for New Hampshire is Boston, which is one of the most expensive media markets in the country. So that for me, that argument doesn't really fly.
Mm,
I think
that's a good
Michigan
point.
would be a great place to would be a great place to do it. I mean, if you've got, let's say that's the first contest, you're going to have at least 15 to 20 candidates spending money on ads in the state of Michigan. I mean, that is a ton of Democratic messaging that those voters are going to get to hear for almost a full year leading up to it, which I think can't do anything but help us in the general election when it comes time to run there.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention obviously huge African American population in Detroit and
Yep.
around. So this is a really and suburban voters. I mean, you go out to Oakland County, Macomb County. There was historic kind of Reagan Democrat place in Macomb County. So there are real voters out there. The other place that is interesting to me also is Georgia, because if we've been
Hmm.
competing in South Carolina, which is a state I'm fond of, and if Mr. Jim Clyburn is listening to this podcast, I am not saying let's get rid of South Carolina, but but Georgia is important because obviously it's been a place that we've won recently, and
Yep.
it's got a huge African American population and rural, all the things we just talked about. It's got a big mix of voters in that state.
Yeah, and I think it would be a great state to have kind of be as one of the top 3 or 4 states so that it gets a ton of attention. I mean, as you'll recall, I think we were both working in 2007 on the 2008 primary, right? So the Hillary Obama primary, and Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. We spent, I don't know, probably 20 days in Iowa and New Hampshire each, but then 10 days each for each of those 20 days in Nevada and South Carolina. So the first 4 states are all going to get a lot of love in terms of advertising and in terms of just candidate time there. So I think Georgia would be a great state as well to put into those first 4 contests.
And I'm always still fond of Nevada. Our friend Bill
I
Buck and
know,
I, we spent a lot of time in Vegas,
a lot of time.
too
Yeah.
much time in Vegas, back in the old days. But I think Nevada, because it does have this huge population of Latino voters, also says something about the Democratic Party, and it's a Western state, and all the other issues that come along with being out west, water and everything else. So it's a good slate of states. I don't know. Where do you think the politics are now in the Democratic Party? Do you think that New Hampshire and Iowa might finally be deposed?
I think that they might be. And I think the strongest argument is we haven't won a general election for president in Iowa in so very long.
Yeah.
And it really is not representative of the rest of the country. We don't have to win it to win the general election. We absolutely positively have to win Michigan to win the general election. It's a lot easier to win the general election if we win Georgia. We basically have to win Nevada. So I would be all for kind of coming up with some sort of combination of those states. So you kind of got Midwest, South, West, and if you want to throw in a Northeast state, sort of because it's because if keep New Hampshire in the top 4, maybe it doesn't need to be the very first primary, but keep it in there just for kind of tradition's sake.
It's not popular on the
I think it'd
left.
be for that too.
It's not popular on the
So
left, Matt, but I'm going to say it. I think it's real, and certainly with a lot of my friends in the African American community, they would probably disagree. But I love New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire is actually like a really great state for people to campaign in, because it is
yeah,
small. You do have the Boston media market, but it is small. But you get up there, people are really invested in the primary. They
sure.
know a lot about politics. They know a lot about policy. They show up at the diners. They show up at the meetings. They show up at people's houses. It's a really it's like a club festival, right? It's like the Burning Man of presidential politics.
Of presidential politics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is true, and that's the argument that both Iowa and New Hampshire make is they're small enough that there is a lot of retail politicking that has to happen to be able to win those states. Iowa and the caucuses were all about building a field organization,
Yeah.
contacting real voters and making sure that they would show up on a cold night in January to caucus for those candidates. And I do think there's some real value in that. I mean, the carry operation in Iowa was amazing, led by John Norris and Jonathan Epstein, and they did a great job of getting a ton of people organized, and they had to come out. And I believe it was snowing that night. It was a pretty awful. But so there is an argument to be made to keep that there. And I think the people in Iowa and the people in New Hampshire really took seriously their job to vet these candidates to figure figure out who would be the best candidate to be the nominee for the party.
Well, and then obviously in 2008, we saw what happened with Barack Obama. It was winning Iowa that shocked the world, and everybody thought,
Right.
"But wow, this guy beat Hillary Clinton in Iowa." And that propelled him into South Carolina, where he was able to take off, which is a really big deal because, frankly, people thought, can this black dude win like a state like Iowa where there are no black people? It's like the whitest state in the calendar other than New Hampshire. Um, all right, so can we talk
Yeah.
about one of the candidates who is running? It seems like he is now starting to make some
Sure.
news again. The governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, has a new book that's going to come out. And in that book, I guess he's laying out some things that are important, including he's keeping the rap feud going with Kamala Harris out in California about the VP vetting process.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like he has took a little bit of umbrage with how many questions they asked him and kind of how pointed the questions were and the tone of the questions. I mean, I guess that's a valid perspective to have. I would think that if you're being vetted to be vice president of the United States, and Vice President Harris has to put that person on the ticket and has to be kind of throw her lot in with this person to be very close to, and the second most important person on the ticket, and second, it will be a person who is a heartbeat away from the presidency. It doesn't strike me that asking some pointed and maybe even some combative questions of somebody who wants to be the vice president of the United States or be the vice presidential nominee is all that offensive. And I guess I'm not sure that I see it quite the same way that Governor Shapiro does. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no. Look, you're dropping somebody into the Super Bowl in the last quarter, right? Like
Yeah.
they were a fantastic college player, or maybe you can even argue they had a really good season, with a team that didn't make it to the playoffs. And now you're going to drop them into the most important game of the year in the final minutes of it. And so you got to make sure as best you can that they can hold up to the scrutiny, they can hold up to the pressure. And so you're going to ask them, I think, some pretty tough questions. There has now been subsequent stories about these questions, and Tim Waltz, it turns out, was being asked tough questions about his lobbying or his relationships with foreign countries at the same time. So kind of, I guess this is the argument. I'm sure the Harris people dropped this, saying, okay, Shapiro, you felt sensitive about the questions that were being asked you, but Tim Waltz also got some questions that he felt sensitive about. And so them's the breaks because that's the game. Right. Like that's the game
It,
we're all
it
playing.
it really is. And like, here's the thing: if you get on that ticket, the Republicans are going to ask those questions. They
That's
are
right.
going to bring up all of that stuff. So if you're very sensitive about it, I think maybe running as vice president is probably not for you. Which I guess Shapiro sort of makes it sound like it was sort of his decision. I don't know, sort of it wasn't me. It was it wasn't you. It was me.
Right,
So
exactly.
we will never really know what happened. But
Well, it is funny.
but
There
look,
was
I
one
think.
point about it that I thought was really funny. There was a there was a line about he thought Kamala Harris didn't really like being vice president, and I could tell you it was frustrating for her. And one of the things that he mentions is that she didn't have her own bathroom, which I will tell you was like a huge issue. In the VP staff, the vice president didn't have her own bathroom. She shares it with the national security advisor. Now they're the only two people who use that bathroom, but it is kind of a thing. You like got to walk down the hall to like go to the bathroom when the president just
Yeah,
has to duck into his own little private space.
yeah. I mean, I guess I think if I don't have my own bathroom at work, but it would be really nice. I would really like it. I don't think I necessarily deserve one, but I kind of feel like the vice president probably deserves one. So
Absolutely.
we may need to look. Now it is absolutely par for the course to be able to do all kinds of reconstruction at the White House
Right.
and the old executive office building. So I think maybe we should look to lobby for a private bathroom for the next vice president of the
Yeah,
United
Trump could
States.
just add it on. He could do a
So,
bathroom remodel down on the second,
yeah,
down on the same floor with the VP's office. Um,
yeah,
and the question, for those of us who have been paying attention to this for a long time, the vice president didn't actually even have an office in the West Wing. That's a modern convention. I think Walter Mondale
right.
was the first vice president to get an office in the West Wing. And for me, the other part about that, which is funny, they placed the vice president's office literally right next door to the chief of staff's office. That means that nobody can walk in or out of the vice president's office
Right.
without the chief of staff's team seeing it, which is incredibly small politics, but important politics if you're paying attention to somebody who might aspire to the job themselves.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then also, but they also have one in the OEOB as well, though. I remember
They do.
Vice President Gore had an office kind of maybe up above where we were in presidential personnel.
Yep, second floor
So
of the OEOB. There's a VP
yeah,
where the desk is. That's where the desk is. That all the vice presidents sign on the way out. You know, I always wondered about the desk. I mean, we can get off this is like silly, but I always wondered about the desk. You sign the desk when you leave the office, which I kind of feel like is a kind of optimistic idea, because what if like you don't make it to the end, or what if like you get bounced out, like fired unceremoniously because you've done something, which has happened to previous vice presidents. It just seems like you should sign the desk the day you start, not the day you leave. But that's just me. That's just me. Anything else happening out there that is catching your eye in American politics?
I don't know. I think we've got, we went over the list of sort of the mainstream contenders last time, and we sort of, the sort of other possibilities, right? The sort of longer shot possibilities, sort of the Mark Cubans, the Jon Stewarts, the yeah, the Oprah Winfreys, those always sort of get talked about in this time, and they sort of get forgotten, and people sort of like kind of slough it on, and even Jon Stewart, there's posts going on Instagram with him talking about people asking him about whether he's going to run for president or not, and his punchline to that is basically the words right before you should run for president are "fuck it, you should run for president," and it basically shows people's dissatisfaction with the current choices. But what I haven't seen anybody talking about when we think about somebody like Jon Stewart is that you have a major world leader who used to be an actor and a comedian running the country of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And, it was sort of a joke when Volodymyr Zelensky was elected, and people were sort of like, fuck it, let's get this guy in. And now, you look back after several years of war in Ukraine, and he is like one of the most respected world leaders,
Yep.
not necessarily by the current administration, but I think, but everybody on our side, and I think around the world, is really impressed with what he's done and how he has stepped up. So I don't know that we should necessarily take these sort of unconventional candidates and just blow them off. I think we may have something like that coming, because people do seem to be pretty disenchanted with the establishment, and we're in strange times. So we should spend some time on this podcast talking about some of these other unconventional candidates, because they could show up kind of really having an impact on this race.
I like it. That's a good idea. That could be called the why not episode. Right?
Right, exactly.
Insert name here. Why not?
Why not? So, stranger things have happened.
Stranger things for sure. All right, Matt, good to talk to you this week. Talk to you next one.
Great to talk to you, Jamal. Thanks.